meeting to order this morning. First things, I'd like to have a referral, maybe a motion to approve the prior minutes from someone, hopefully.
I'll make that motion. This is Peter McDevitt.
Thank you, Peter. A second?
I'm on the second.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I heard someone offer a second.
Brad McGowan said he'll make the second.
Thank you, Brad. I appreciate it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm hoping that we get a number of individuals from the Economic Recovery Task Force this morning. I only see a couple this morning. So in that sense, let me kind of click on a button here if you guys don't mind. What I'm going to do is start with Wayne. Wayne, if we can start with your agenda, maybe what we'll do is we'll give everybody a chance to join in, and we'll do that after you go through your agenda, if you don't mind.
There we go. Final mute button. Good morning. This morning I have two requests for consideration by the committee. This is to transfer funds from the 8029 First Wilderness budget program into a capital fund so that we can accurately record these funds as match for program expenditures. So first there's a resolution 10, which transfers the money into the transfer account, and then resolution number 9 transfers it from the transfer account into the appropriate capital fund. So I'd ask for the committee's consideration of that.
Brad McGowan brings it to the floor.
We have a motion to bring it to the floor. What about both of these at the same time? We have a motion for both?
Sure.
And a second?
Resolution 10 and 9.
I believe I heard someone with the second. Any discussion from the committee?
No, I don't think you had a second. Mr. McGowan was just.
Mumbling again.
This is Peter McDevitt. I'll second that, Mike.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it. So any discussion on Wayne's request? Seeing none, hearing none, I'm going to call a vote. All those in favor say aye.
All right.
Aye.
And any opposed? And that is carried also. Wayne?
All right. Thank you. There's a couple things I want to bring up before I turn this over to Sarah for a discussion on the census. We had 2 monitoring visits on the Community Development Block Grant Program that were conducted remotely by the Office of Community Renewal. So the first was for the wastewater hookup to Countryside. The review went, as I said, remotely. We supplied a number of materials to the state office ahead of time, followed up with a couple other requests after the meeting. And basically, there are no findings, there's no issues and no recommendations. They said everything went well. All funding expenditures were consistent with program guidelines. And so we'll be getting some closeout paperwork from them for the chairman to sign. So that's good. That one will close out hopefully before the end of the year. At the next committee meeting, hopefully we'll be able to have all the paperwork in place and we'll be able to put a resolution forward to close out that CD74 account before the end of the year. The second one is, some of you may remember, we had some planning money from the Office of Community Renewal to undertake a building study assessment for Countryside. That program also is finished, and the state has forwarded the closeout documents. We just got those Monday. They require the chairman's signature, so we'll be getting these over to Amanda or to the county attorney's office, whichever, to process the signature and get that. Again, hopefully we can have that on the November committee meeting to close out before the end of the year. The one other thing I want to just bring up to the committee's attention is I brought it up to the committee before just as information. The Department of State, through which we have a number of grant programs, has been somewhat behind and reimbursements to the county. We did, I'm happy to say that, through actually Sue in the office here had a lot of painstaking work, resubmitting paperwork multiple times that they seem to have lost down at the state. But we did receive $314,000 as a reimbursement to the county that had been basically outstanding since November of 2018. So that's good to get that cleared off. We still have $194,000 pending reimbursements, but those went down in August, so they're not too far behind on their process. But I just wanted to report because I know I brought up to the committee multiple times that the state was lagging behind on reimbursements for some, and we've had them sitting down there for a while. I'm happy to say that we are pretty well current with our reimbursements from the state. And beyond that, I believe that's all I have. I'll turn it over to Sarah to talk about the census.
Thanks, Wayne. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning. So before I talk about the census, I also just wanted to do a quick broadband update. So I had sent a handful of you a map that Amanda worked on with mapping the charter connection list that Charter sent to Ryan, I think in August, along with the data that ECC Technologies had collected back in 2014. And then last Friday, I had a conference call with John Wheatley and Jim Siplin and our ECC Technologies project manager. So that was a very informative call, and I think ECC is making good progress on updating the mapping of where we have broadband throughout the county, and I think we'll be meeting every 2 weeks going forward. So I will continue to keep everybody updated about that, but I think after ECC seems like they're doing a great job with getting everything updated, and we should have a really good handle on the areas that we're missing after they finish. So
Sarah, if you don't mind. Claudia, do you have a question?
I do. Thanks, Chairman Wild. Sarah, do we have a sense now, a generic sense of the percentage of residents who don't have broadband? Do we just have no clue? Not much clue.
We could absolutely calculate that. I think that as soon as ECC is done with the updating, which they're close to being done with updating, we can calculate that based on 2010 census figures. And I can also calculate it based on households using our real property data. So as soon as they are finished, I'll do those calculations.
Do you have an estimate based on the 2010 census data?
I haven't calculated it yet, so
Okay.
Yeah, but doable. I just want to wait for them to finish because they're close to being finished, I believe.
Yeah, and just to follow up with on Sarah's point, this is John Wheatley talking. They're going to enter a second phase. That's the first phase of their work. This is ECC's that we set up with them to update that inventory and get it up to date. The second phase is going to be integral to answering your question, Claudia, about how many people actually have it, and if they have it, is it acceptable? There's a whole survey component to this that is like a whole second project that we just approved. Our board just approved this morning. That's going to start like very soon, and that's going to take the data from the maps and then use that as a basis for this survey for people to fill out, both residents, businesses, institutions, schools, whatever, to fill it out and explain if they do or they don't have coverage. If they do have coverage, or they have issues with it, do they have enough bandwidth? Is it because the problem is just saying you have broadband?
Can they afford it?
Because obviously the fiber is great because that's scalable and that goes up to 100 megs up, 100 megs down, or more. But the problem is some of these areas are quote unquote classified as covered, even though they're only 10 megs not acceptable. You can't, you freeze up. So you have one Zoom call and you're frozen. So there's that whole kind of dynamic of kind of defining where the actual lines are. And all this mapping is going to be very integral to this, but also the survey component, which that's going to really tell us a bigger story. Sorry, Sarah. Sorry, Sarah.
No, and Sarah, if you don't mind, one of the reasons why this is a focus is that I think we all anticipate that there may be some funding available for the expansion of broadband. What COVID has taught us is that there's a big need for connectivity. So our thought is that if we get a sense of where we are, where our gaps are, we can start to address those gaps that were supposed to be filled by the prior funding, and hopefully position ourselves well for the next funding. The concern is if we haven't completed what we were originally funded to do, then we may get passed over for the second round or the next round of broadband funding. So that's why this is so important. So Sarah, sorry to interrupt. Keep going unless there's other questions for Sarah on broadband.
Supervisor Hogan has her hand up.
I don't see her, but Supervisor Hogan. Oh, sorry.
She's on mute.
You're muted still, Andrea.
Mute, Andrea.
She's working on it. Give her a second.
Not there yet, Andrea.
Put it in the chat box.
There you go.
All right.
Yay!
You can hear now?
Absolutely.
This is a really appropriate conversation because in order to get into this meeting today, I have to be on both my phone and the computer because my broadband couldn't support the video and the audio. So my question, I think John sort of answered it, is how are you defining broadband for the purposes of this mapping?
Picking up what I'm laying.
Like, are you,
Well,
you
we're
know,
not, this is Jim, actually, John. We're not defining it. We're essentially characterizing it. So whatever is out there, we will define the capacity of it without regard to whether or not it does or does not meet any particular threshold. But we'll be in a position if somebody says 50 megs is the threshold to know what facilities actually meet that requirement. But we're doing a full inventory of everything that's out there.
whether it's fiber or whether it's,
Yes.
okay, gotcha. And the second part of it is, in advance of sending out that survey, if I may make a suggestion, we may need to do a PR push on teaching people how to do their own home assessment with a speed test. A lot of people don't understand, you know, how to get that information and how to use that information.
That's a good input, Andrea. John, you and I should work on that. We should do a video version and a written version so that people know how easy that is to do, and show them how we can do it.
Yes. Good idea.
Any other questions or comments?
Sorry, Mike, that I was late. We had our own board meeting this morning, and I had a number of people that I
Morning,
couldn't let
Tim.
go of.
Not an issue. Good morning. Thanks for joining. Any other discussion on broadband? We're going to have more of that later, but since Sarah brought it up, we might as well just go for it. In that case, Sarah, please move on.
Okay, so I just wanted to give everybody a brief update on the census. So if you're following the roller coaster of the news, the census is now over. It ended up initially being extended and then cut back to October 15th. So the data collection period is over. Amanda and I went around yesterday and picked up most of the lawn signs. I think there's a few left here and there that Chris will be picking up in the next few days. You can get rid of your banners. I'm curious to see how the numbers turn out. Obviously, there's concerns about the short time frame for processing the numbers, as well as the shortened time frame for data collection. So you may have seen news articles or information from the Census Bureau saying that they achieved 99% count. However, it did not follow the traditional path. that past censuses have followed. Typically, enumerators make up to 6 attempts to contact homeowners who haven't self-responded. And in this census, those attempts were cut short and enumerators used alternative methods for counting the non-responding households. So if they couldn't make personal contact in the first couple of visits, they would talk to landlords or neighbors or use other records to try to enumerate those households. So we don't yet have a sense of what the impact of those alternative methods is going to be on the count. And then also there are some concerns about the sped up delivery of the apportionment numbers by December 31st instead of the April 1st date that the Census Bureau had originally asked for. That creates an issue with the demographers at the Census Bureau having to skip some quality checks that they typically go through. So at this point, we just have to wait and see how our numbers turn out and hope that they're reasonable when we get them. But thank you to all of you for your continued efforts in getting the word out through our crazy 2020 census. And I think we'll hope that 2030 census is less eventful.
So Sarah, are there going to be any further analysis of the count to say that we know we missed a certain number, and some analysis to say give us an extra 2% or 5%?
So the Census Bureau has a very involved process for processing the data. So typically in a typical, after the data collection period has ended, in a typical census, that process takes about 6 months, and they do a lot of analysis. They do, a review of all the collected data. They make sure that people didn't answer the census twice, that they haven't missed people. It's a lengthy, involved process for generating those figures accurately. Because that request for an extension to April 1st, which would give them their 6 months, was not granted. They now have, essentially 2.5 months to deliver those draft figures. So they're going to have to skip a lot of the quality control measures that they typically go through, which is concerning, but we'll see what happens.
So if I can follow up on the last census that we did, we had a response rate from our citizens, and that percentage, whatever it was, how does that percentage compare to this percentage this year? And how much did they add when they went through that analysis?
So there's 2 components to the census. The first is the self-response. Nationwide, the 2010 census self-response and the 2020 census self-response. So that's people answering online, calling the Census Bureau, or sending back their census questionnaire. Those are deemed the most accurate response methods. And so the better self-response, higher self-response rate you get, the better. So Warren County ended up below the 2010 census. Nationwide, we ended up very close to the 2010 census. I think it was less than a percentage point difference between the two. But the Census Bureau doesn't just guess on the remaining, 50 or 30 or whatever that percentage difference between. So nationwide, the self-response rate was about 67%. So the remainder of that amount is what the enumerators collect. So they go out into the field and they find all the people who haven't responded, and they collect the data from those people in their households. If the homeowners don't respond, if they just never answered the door, or they can't make it to the house for whatever reason, the enumerators can use alternative methods, which are talking to their neighbors. If it's a rental, they can talk to landlords. They can also use public records. utility records and things like that to fill in those gaps. So basically it's our self-response rate plus how successful the enumerators were in reaching all of the households who didn't self-respond. So the Census Bureau is giving the estimate that, you know, they've counted 99% of the households. The concern comes in as far as how did they actually talk to the non-responding households in person, or did they rely on alternate methods to reach those households?
So I'm just curious, if you were to project, what's our drop in population? And we know that that's going to translate into significant numbers, but if you were to give us a guess.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't have a good sense of what that's going to be. I mean, a completely wild guess would be that we're going to drop by a couple thousand in population, but that is not based in scientific rigor. That's just kind of my personal guess, which could be off.
That's fine. The guess is fine, but it just remind everybody again, what's the funding that we get per capita?
So the funding comes through various different programs. So obviously it depends on our income. So if we have a higher level of low income population, we'll get a higher level of funding. But on average, I believe it's about $3,000 per person per year.
I have a question for Sarah when you have a chance, Mike.
Thank you, Supervisor Hogan. Feel free.
This might be skipping steps ahead, Sarah, but is there any discussion around the fact that this census was conducted during a time when we're seeing population shift out of cities and into rural areas, and whether this census will even be considered valid 5 years from now?
So the census is a snapshot in time. So it collects information about where a person was living on April 1st, 2020.
Right.
So obviously there's been a lot of movement from spring of 2020 through fall of 2020. So yes, I would anticipate that this census data is not going to be reflective of current reality. The Census Bureau does do the American Community Survey annually, which is a smaller subset survey, and they extrapolate data from that smaller subset. So that data is updated annually, and we'll get, annual updates between the next between this 2020 census and the next 2030 census. So those shifts will be reflected in those American Community Survey updates in the intervening years.
So, follow-up question, for the purposes of those grants that we're talking about, do they use the American Community Survey or do they use the census data?
We can use either. So typically, as you get farther from the most recent census, we'll tend to use American Community Survey data. So typically now it's less accurate typically than the decennial census. But as you get more removed from the most recent decennial census, that also becomes less accurate. So typically when we apply for grants, now we'll use American Community Survey data. And then once the 2020 census figures are released, we'll use those 2020 census figures. Also, the American Community Survey asks additional questions that aren't on the decennial census. So household income and those types of questions are only included in the American Community Survey. So we'll use that data regardless, but we'll most likely use the 2020 census figures for just straight population when we get them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Sarah about the census? I'm sorry, I can't see anyone in the boardroom, so. Hearing no other questions. Sarah, anything else you'd like to add?
Nope, I'm all set. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And we're pretty close to 10 o'clock. I know a couple of the task force members had conflicts and would be difficult to show up today, but if you bear with me for a few minutes, I'm going to go through some of my notes. And actually, I was going through some of my notes from the early days of the task force, and I remember we were talking about J1s and what we're going to do with how we're going to get staff to help with our tourism industry. We're dealing with masks and non-compliance, and we've come a long way. We've come a long way. But what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about some of the key points. And one of the things that I don't think many of you recognize, Elise Stefanik's office, Jake, I can't recall his last name right now, but her representative, local representative, is basically on every one of our calls. And that is, from my perspective, it allows our congresswoman to know exactly what our challenges are, where we're going, as well as us to understand some of the opportunities that might be breaking to help us and give us an edge moving forward. So that's something that I think is pretty important, and we're fortunate to have her support moving on. We also had a big challenge with the transition that occurred at EDC. We lost an icon with Ed, and we gained another future icon with Jim. Hopefully, I don't want to put you under too much pressure, Jim, but Jim is now on board. And we've moved in a slightly different direction. We're looking more at the bigger picture for the county. And although it's very early on, I'm very encouraged about where we're going to end up. And Jim was kind enough to give us an update a couple of weeks ago. And maybe if we have time, we'll get to Jim to give us a little more update in terms of where we're going. One of the things that really hasn't taken root yet is a look at policies. What are some of the policies that we can possibly affect and change that allow us to be more productive, allow us to move forward with our businesses? And just a couple that come to mind, the transitional benefits. There are many people in the community that rely on our unemployment benefits and disability benefits. Sometimes it's a deterrent for them looking for jobs. So one of the thoughts is, can we find a way to do some transitional benefits to help move these people from public support to joining our workforce? The other one, Kathy Munsell, she's on. Kathy is kind to remind us all the time about the 14-year-olds not being able to use knives. So actually, we're digging into the workforce, and Liza and Kathy and others have been working real hard looking at our workforce. But some of the policy things related to expanding our workforce are things that we're going to be looking at the future. There's also at-risk businesses. We're still in a situation where there's many businesses that are at risk. That's going to be a focus moving forward. There is also, from the tourism side, a future expansion of our tourism business. I don't see Joanne on the call, but a number of months ago, we had a representative from do the STAR report. The STAR report, for those who aren't familiar, is the report of occupancy at our hotels, what the demand is, what the rates are. They are a international organization, and in the next committee meeting in tourism, the hope is that we can spring a few $1,000s, about $3,500, to have this organization look at the country, so to speak, to identify different regions that may have expanded their tourism business. And once we can identify those organizations or those counties, those towns, those regions that have expanded their tourism season, we can start digging into how did they do it? What were some of the best practices? What can we learn? And what can we apply to our region to expand our tourism business? So that's going to be a request coming up for those of you that might be on the tourism committee. And unfortunately, I am, so I will be supporting this once it happens. I'm sure Jim will talk about the opportunities we have from relocation from urban areas and metro areas, from a business as well as from an individual basis. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot about is also supply chain realignments. So we know earlier on in this pandemic that we had a big issues with PPE, personal protective equipment. The reason was it's all being made in China. So not only was that disrupted because of the pandemic, but many of our businesses were disrupted because their supply chains were international. And one of the thoughts that I have is there's going to be opportunities within this country to bring the supply chain closer to home, which would mean more opportunities for business for us. So with that in mind, I'm going to just kind of turn it over to a few of the people that I see on the phone. Jim, if you don't mind, I know you're busy. You just finished a board meeting, but are there any new updates that you might have from the last time we've talked for the committee?
Absolutely. Thanks, Supervisor Wild. It's great to see you all again. We talked this morning with with the EDC board about a number of things that we've already socialized with many of you. Not only we got a resolution passed to move on to the second phase of our broadband work, as John probably shared with you, but probably more importantly, we were able to articulate what would be the strategy once we get all this data and how we want to both organize it and collaborate with the county and others. We had a very effective meeting with Wayne's staff and Sarah in particular about getting her involved in the process at this point, so that we're positioning ourselves to be as effective as we can be when the opportunity for new funding or new programs comes along. We will continue to engage in helping to problem solve on any of the existing work whenever we think we can. But we got real commitment from our own board about the strategic priority of infrastructure in general and broadband as a specific focus area probably for some time. I think until before that, they were kind of seeing this as a project, and now I'm trying to get them to think of it as much more as a strategic direction that we're going to have to invest in on an ongoing basis. And then to that point, we also talked a lot about the work that's going to be required around professional relocation. I proposed a strategy where we would begin piloting some social media work and some collection of data around those that are actually in the process or have recently gone through the process of relocating themselves professionally, and got agreement with my board to begin to fund those things in a pilot way. This is really important. As you know from following the comments that we've been making, not only to you, but are oftentimes picked up in the press, this is a real thing that is happening. And I would like to position Warren County as the kind of place where we're not just watching it happen, but we're actively managing to it and growing from it. One of the things I share oftentimes with people is if 100 people from the New York City area who are working professionals making professional type salaries move here, it's as if we put in a small factory. And that kind of thinking, we tend to think about factories as big step functions, but this is literally a wave of activity that can be measured in hundreds of professional relocators. We want them to see the entire county as their opportunity, not an entity like Glens Falls or an entity like Lake George, but to have access to all of those things, no matter where they come here in our county. So two really good things to get our board behind, both financially and from a resource standpoint. And we're going to start to develop those strategies as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions from the committee? Any in the boardroom for Jim and John? I want to leave out John. Hearing none. Liza, can you give us a brief update?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Excuse me. I do want to share that we will have updated local unemployment data. It's scheduled to be released today for September. We were still at about 8% from August, which we were happy to be back down in single digits, but that's still double what we normally are at any time of the year. We do anticipate that some of those numbers will go up in the winter, so we're trying to get ahead of that now by making sure that we're placing people at jobs. So a lot of my work in the department really aligns well with the task force. So we have a lot of short-term and long-term projects going on. Just to piggyback on what the chairman mentioned about transitional benefits, I do still have, 2 employment counselors working with social services and doing assessments with people who are receiving social benefits about whether they're employable or not, and then offering the employment services that we have. We're also partnering with SAIL, Southern Adirondack Center for Independent Living, to make sure that any workers with disabilities do not lose all of their benefits, but kind of have a sweet balance of working and receiving pay, but also some of their disability benefits. Unfortunately, New York State ranks about 40th in the country for employing workers with disabilities. So I'm working with several organizations to increase the number of workers with disabilities to help our businesses hire more workers with disabilities and use the skill sets that they do have to offer. So short term, we're working on hospitality training. I'm chairing the Hospitality Workforce Solutions subcommittee, which came out of the Economic Recovery Task Force. And short term, we will have some training programs to get more workers for the hospitality field by next summer. And then long term, we're partnering with SUNY Adirondack, Lake George Chamber of Commerce, making sure that there is more concrete training, right? There's certificate programs and degree programs with hospitality management. And we're mapping out all the different career paths that someone can take in the field of hospitality. So we're hoping that will recruit more workers to the industry, and also will save businesses time and money with recruiting workers for the hospitality field. We're still doing job matching and job postings for businesses. We certainly, even though we're not able to do our monthly job fairs, we're supporting any businesses that want to do an on-site, socially distanced hiring event or job fair. Gore Mountain is having one this Saturday, and we are helping to advertise that and get them a lot of workers for the winter. We are, as you know, we have a new Workforce Development Board Executive Director, so we're doing a reset and kind of orientation with that board in November, which we're very excited about. We're also offering virtual workshops. There's actually one going on right now for the entire Capital Region, so that's another way that we're able to get local job seekers prepared to get a job. And then short term, we're also applying for a rural healthcare workforce grant. We're partnering with several different counties. This will really benefit the northern part of our county and Supervisor Hogan area. We are really, we have so many people working on that grant, so we're really optimistic about it, and that's due in November, so we'll see. Long term, the hospitality training long term, there's a child care coalition that we have developed. We have another meeting tomorrow, so we're working with Southern Adirondack Child Care Network and Bright Side Up, which covers Saratoga County and other counties south, so that we can help pay for the training course that is required to open your own independent child care center. And then we're hoping that we can get businesses to invest in the startup costs, which really are the most expensive part of opening a child care center. Apprenticeship programs also will be long-term, addressing the transportation issues. Aside from childcare, transportation continues to be a challenge. I have a call with CDTA this Thursday about their bike share program to see if we can expand that into Warren County. That would benefit our workforce, but also our tourism industry. And then also working with Greater Glens Falls Transit on a map that will show which businesses are on which bus routes. We have so many businesses not even aware of what bus route their business is located on, and job seekers who don't know which businesses that are hiring and how they would get there. So I'll be working with their new deputy director on developing that business map and making sure we address that communication gap or knowledge gap about which businesses are on which bus routes. And then long term, we certainly want to continue to focus on more youth career exploration, work readiness programs, and working with the schools. And then positive work culture so that we can retain our workforce and then develop an incentives and rewards program. I'll be doing that work with the chambers. And then that will also support our four-season tourism economy that the chairman mentioned.
Thank you, Liza. And, just a review, right? We're looking at benefits. There's childcare, there's training, there's transportation, and I'm sure we give Liza a few more minutes. She'll come up with about 20 other things that she's working on. She's doing a great job. Any questions for Liza moving forward? I saw Claudia's hand on first. Supervisor Bramer.
Thank you, Liza. You're doing an amazing job. My question is, can you give us a timeline of our unemployment rates since the pandemic and what they look like now? Like,
yeah, so
maybe before, in the height of it, and now.
Sure.
I'm hoping it's less.
Yes, and I have this all in a diagram. I can also send it out to the committee if anybody's interested.
Oh, cool, yeah.
So well, not really a diagram, but a table. But so normally we're around 3 or 4%, right? In April, we spiked to 17%, which was pretty high, right? And Warren County is usually a little bit higher than Saratoga and Washington, so that's been consistent. And so, it dropped in the summer because we had summer job opportunities through the tourism industry and hospitality industry. And so we dropped to about 10% and then went to about 8% for August. The September numbers will be out. They're scheduled to be out later today. But that's still double what we normally are.
Thank you.
Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you, Chairman. Liza, thank you for working on the child care. The Common Ground Alliance, in partnership with the Northern Forest Center, this year held their forum about attracting a new generation. Child care is on the top of the list. So keep us posted on that as well. So anything that's developing, so we can keep people in the loop. And the other item, second to that in your report, oh man, I lost that thought. So I'll just have to let it go.
Well, Craig thinks of that one. I thought of another one too. Liza, I'm going to jump in, Mike, sorry. What about the unemployment benefits? There was a lot of talk about the extra $600. That has gone away, right?
Yes, that ended at the end of July, but there was lost wages assistance that went into effect. We saw after the extra 600 ended, we definitely saw more people getting back to work, which was great. While there is not a lot more in terms of money that's being offered in terms of unemployment benefits, it's been extended for a length of time. So normally somebody could be eligible for unemployment benefits for 26 weeks. And now it's about 56 weeks, because when the state goes under a certain or above a certain threshold for unemployment, extended benefits automatically have to kick in by law. So we're still seeing, people getting back to work and not taking advantage of the extra 600. And we are still advocating that to our legislators that is not increased again, because it definitely impacted our businesses and our workforce. We understand, though, that some families are still really struggling with trying to figure out how to do school and work. It's impossible. I don't know how parents are doing it. So we're hoping, as people are getting a rhythm going, but things are changing with infection rates and schools opening and closing. Are
you finding that there are a lot of openings in our employers?
Yes.
You're looking at that through into the winter season too?
Yes. I still feel like there are more jobs than workers right now. And everywhere we go, we still see hiring signs. So it just may not be all the jobs that people, are desiring, but it is still work.
Or that they could make work with, some kid at home right now.
Right, exactly.
You can't just leave them to do online learning.
Exactly. So
up to a certain age, that doesn't work.
Yeah, the scheduling is a challenge for families. We have received more inquiries about part-time work. So, you know, that's new. And there are still more people interested in training in school, which normally happens in an economic downturn as well. And we are covering some training costs for those who qualify.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Liza. Thanks.
Liza, if I may, could you expand just briefly on the impediments to expanding our childcare and the work that you've undertaken to help with startup costs?
Sure. So we know that we don't have enough childcare options in our area, especially in the rural communities. The required health and safety course through Southern Adirondack Child Care Network only costs $250. And I can cover that through my grant, my training funds. But it's the startup cost. Oh, and there's a CPR course is only $75. So $325 only for someone to open their own independent child care center. The startup costs are what is really challenging. So that can be anywhere from $2,200 to $7,000 if they need additional safety equipment at home, a fence, recess equipment, etc. So our vision and our goal is that we would have, perhaps just throwing a number out there, $500 sponsorships from businesses to invest in the development of more child care centers. And so that's what this coalition is working on. So Bright Side Up and Southern Adirondack Child Care Network would be the ones to support someone who wants to open a child care center. They would schedule them for the training. They would do the assessment process, make sure it's a good fit. They would provide all the information and resources. We would help fund the program with our local businesses if possible. Does that help?
Yes.
I have a question.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Supervisor Hogan?
Thank you, Chairman. Liza, are you prioritizing requests for funding for the child care training to areas where there is no child care already?
Yes, and Lynn Sickles of the Southern Adirondack Child Care Network, she is an expert on the areas that are most in need, right? And so we would help advertise and recruit interested people, and certainly we would share that information with you as we finalize these plans.
Okay, if there's any way that you know we can help, let us know to get the information out, because I know that that's often the biggest challenge.
Exactly, will do. Supervisor Hogan.
Sorry, any other questions?
I remember the second one here, Mr. Chairman. Liza, the rural healthcare worker, what is that about?
Yes, thank you for your question, Supervisor Leggett. There's a U.S. Department of Labor grant that is out right now, and it is to recruit and place workers and recruit, train, and place workers into healthcare fields, particularly in rural areas. And so there's only certain parts of our county that are designated rural by HRSA. And that's why we're also partnering with several other counties to make it more likely that we could hopefully be rewarded with the grant.
Any other questions?
And one more thing, I'm sorry, Supervisor Leggett's question. We would be the goal is that with our partners would be BOCES and SUNY Adirondack, so that we're helping recruit people for their training programs, right? LPN, et cetera. And then there are business partners in the healthcare field who we would help place those workers once they complete the training program.
Thank you, Liza. Any other questions? Moving on, Joanne Connolly. Joanne, I'm sorry, I missed the fact that you might be in the boardroom. I talked a little bit about tourism. Is there something that you would like to add to the conversation, going backwards a bit?
Joanne just stepped out. I can have her chime in when she comes back.
That's the pleasures of Zoom. Okay, thanks. Moving forward, Mr. Behan isn't here, but a couple of the key players are. I see Kathy Munsell and Frank Dietrich. You know all these guys from our hospitality team. They've been very much engaged with Mark's committee on communication and tourism. Kathy, Frank, I know Mark's not here, and I hate to put you guys on the spot, but any highlights that you'd like to share with the committee in terms of where that committee is going, where the hospitality committee is going, that I may have missed?
Frank, you want to take that?
Sure. I think you all know, Mark is doing an exceptional job leading what started off as a communication track earlier in the year, pulling together, a number of different organizations, Joanne from the tourism department, Gina from the regional chamber, representatives from the ARCC, and that group's expanded in a meaningful way. And the scope's expanded somewhat as well. So communication early on was a tactical problem. What do we do in April or probably May timeframe into June and through the summer in terms of getting the message out about safety and what we can do, what's available for our guests in the area. Results are impressive there. I should note Sarah Mannix and Jesse Jackson from Look TV have been significant contributors here to the team in terms of trying to come together with what should we be doing strategically, tactically, what are the measurements telling us, are we getting the return we expect, et cetera. And the efforts expanded beyond tactical now to more strategic. Tactics continue through this time of year and into the early winter months with what should we be thinking about in terms of activities to keep the interest in our region alive. And then more strategically, what should we be doing on a longer run basis? Here considering, what's our overall strategy and theme, if you will, for promoting the Lake George area as a destination that's desirable for tourists, as well as to Jim's points, future residents in our region. That also goes then with some effort now around some data collection and analysis. How do we stack up against others? And Mark's leading the charge to try to collect some information just on how other regions look at tourism. Do we have a peer out there somewhere who went from a largely seasonal business to more year-round? That could be summer extending to winter, or probably more likely winter extending into summer, as you see ski resorts, for example, in Colorado try to become more year-round. So are there some lessons learned out there that we can pull on, to try to continue to advance the tourism economy? Kathy, anything else that I missed there? I'm not sure.
You covered it all, I think, Frank. I think it's important for all of our supervisors to know that it is a mandate for us to revisit and continue a Four Seasons tourism economy and all players, not just, those of us that have larger numbers of rooms. We are committed to assist in whatever manner that looks like.
Right. And this change, just to, contribute to Kathy's comment, this circumstances we're in present us with a wonderful opportunity to change. Guest behaviors are changing because of this. We've come through a September timeframe that was exceptionally strong for tourism. We are October exceptionally strong for tourism. It's making, seasonal properties are seasonal. They honestly, it's not a decision. It's the property says you can't use it in the winter. It won't heat. It's too hilly. There's a whole series of problems that get in the way of a lot of properties in our region. But there's others that are on the cusp of making some serious decisions that have to be dealt with. Honestly, this is kind of real-time decision-making going on. Should you be open? If you think about closing, should you push into November because October is especially strong? If your property can do it. Or are you uncertain and should we just shut the thing down and call it a year? And so I think we're in this interesting decision-making balance. It's property by property on what's the best thing to do. If we can continue to drive the interest, speaking specifically for Earl of West, we normally are a 5-day-a-week operation. Honestly, I'm thinking my spectrum goes to open 2 days a week to maybe it should be 7. And it just it all depends on, are people going to want to come? If they're going to come, we'll stay open. If they're not, I can't afford to stay open in the winter because the money didn't happen in the summer like it normally does. That carries us through, significant losing months in January, February, March in particular. So, hopefully we can keep up the momentum we've got here. Guests are interested in being in our region still, and we have a lot of amenities to offer them, well past, parasailing on the lake or whatever we call our summer things to do. And the effort that's coming together with Joanne on promotion, with Sarah, Jesse, Mark, and others on the marketing and promotion effort, I believe is significant progress.
I would echo what Frank said too, in terms of us being busier than we thought we were going to be. We did see, as I mentioned in our recovery task force, significant almost doubling of reservations during the summer in terms of activity. And we are not seeing that now, but we are seeing a consistent, very short term for a large number. So I think people are making the decision. They've between Joanne and Gina and all the people that Frank just mentioned, getting us out there, they're making decisions at the last minute to quote unquote escape. And I've talked to a number of people recently. We had 60 rooms in one of our hotels on Monday night, which is unheard of. So we are continuing to see it. So all of us are kind of waiting to support the local smaller businesses that are trying to figure out if they should stay open. It's like, it's the chicken or egg thing. They want to know we're going to house people so that they can stay open. So we are working as a very strong team and supporting, all the different businesses to be aware. For instance, the boat company, the Dows were going to close down after Columbus Day, and I keep sending them our rooms, as do other people. And the result of it is that they have now stayed open, and they're going to be open again this weekend. So these decisions are truly being made very quickly, and we all want to stay open, but there'll be, if there's a point that it drops off, I assume all of us would make similar decisions.
I'm sorry, I was interrupted there. The booking window that Kathy referenced is unusually tight. Usually, Kathy, I think you probably concur. You usually have about a 3-week visibility on what's happening. It's now like 7 days, maybe 10. So you're sitting there wondering if you're making a mistake, and the next thing you know, you have crazy occupancy. We hope that momentum continues because it's good. We've got people that are still working, and we need the guests to be here to keep them on the job.
So do either of you have any insight in terms of what's going on with that metrics subcommittee? The evaluation of...
No, I haven't seen any results. I've had ad hoc conversations with the folks that are on the team. I think they're all positive. Joanne might actually have the better insight there. I think she's on that group. The insight that I've gathered, Mike, has been positive. They think, we're getting some good data. We're seeing, the analysis is deeper analysis because there's more eyeballs on it, which is a good thing to do. Joanne, is there other stuff going on there that we're not aware of? Well, maybe she's not in the room.
Good morning. This is Joanne, Supervisor Wild. I am here in the boardroom.
Good morning. Sorry I missed you.
So that metrics subcommittee is part of the larger economic recovery task force. So let me just go back for a minute. From my point of view, my seat in the tourism department, we're doing our day-to-day tourism promotion and all that covers and entails, which is a lot of work for my staff. So in addition to that, now, I've been on the economic recovery task force. And as Kathy, Frank, and Mark have noted, that's changed over the course of time. We began with pandemic response and day one workers and masks and safety compliance. And now we've moved into some long-term goals. The group has strategic planning, OpTax funding. There are some subcommittees of the hospitality and communications group. Metrics is one of them, and I'm on that committee. Some of my supervisors are on this call on my tourism group. Some I've had conversations with, but not all. So I would like to bring this discussion up at my next tourism committee meeting. I will have this next upcoming month, just to let them know all of the work that's going on, the direction that we're moving in. And just, I need for them to understand everything that's going on. There's quite a bit, and I think it should be, as the tourism department, I'm answering to my committees and to the board of supervisors. So I would just like them all to be involved with so much that is going on. In terms of that metrics subcommittee, Mike, you had mentioned the STR report. We'll talk about that at the next committee meeting. In addition to that, there's credit card information you can buy. There's mobile tracking from your smartphone, reports and research that you can purchase. So there is so much that you can spend your money on. And it's all good, but how much do we spend on research versus could those dollars be spent on promotion? So it's just a conversation. It's not a yes or a no or a good or a bad, but it's part of the larger conversation. So that's all. Good work is taking place, but I would like my committee to really understand the larger picture of what's going on.
Oh, that's fine, Joanne. Is there a committee meeting, a tourism committee meeting this month?
I do not have one scheduled in this cycle. We just went out to bid on our media buy, and our RFP responses have come back in. And I have 15 to go through, so I did not think I was ready at this cycle. So it will be the following month.
So I hate to delay something like this data dive that the STR report can give us about counties and regions that may have expanded their tourism industry. And Joanne, I believe you have a quote for $3,500. They think that they can come back with 5 different regions that have expanded their tourism seasons. I hate to wait another month and not start until December when we could actually have some eyeballs on this earlier. Is there any chance that we might be able to free up some funding to make this happen quicker? And I guess I'm not sure who to ask for that.
There's promotion dollars in my budget. Am I having is this coming through the Economic Development Committee, or am I having a meeting myself?
Well, I think no one trusts me at the county with money because the Economic Development Committee doesn't have any funding. So I have to look at other places. And I see Ryan Moore is on the bottom left of my screen. Ryan, can you come up with $3,500 for me?
If the board gives me permission.
How many on the board? So I guess I'd like to get a sense of the supervisors that are on the line, not necessarily just on the committee, but on the, and whether or not this is something we'd like to move forward with. Andrea, go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm very uncomfortable with this not coming through tourism committee. I guess my question is, what's on fire? Why can't this wait for the next tourism committee?
This means it's another 90 days or so before we get information. So we can continue to move at the pace of government, or we can be more nimble and get this information and try to get action on it. They're not going to tell us what to do. They're just going to give us regions that we could study and look at. And that follow-on analysis is going to be in-depth. It's going to take a long time. So that's my question. What if this is a long-term thing? Why can't we wait for the next tourism meeting? Well, there might be some things that we might want to do next year. That's all I'm thinking of.
Okay. I'm really uncomfortable.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
Hey, Mike.
Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you explain again what you're looking for?
Well, again, the people that do the STAR report are international. They have data from all over the country and all over the world. And when they were here, I think it was in the middle of winter, Gene Merlino hosted them in a presentation from the STAR report. I spoke with the individual who gave that presentation about digging into their data and identifying regions that may have been able to expand their tourism industry. And I asked her to look into it, and I asked Joanne to look into it to see how much it would cost to do something like that. So bottom line is that they're going to go through their database or similar size regions, identify those regions that have expanded their tourism season based primarily on just occupancy data. And then allow us to pick and choose from those identified counties, or well, basically not to pick and choose. They'll choose the counties that are the most appropriate to our situation and give us a list. Maybe it's Aspen, Colorado. Maybe it's a place in Florida. Maybe it's a place in Maine that's expanded there. I don't know, right? But when we talk about expanding our tourism economy, and I've talked to many about this, the question always is, how are we going to do it? And there's no real answer. So from my sense, the only way we can really try to figure this out is to look at others who've been successful in doing it. So the thought is, identify those regions that have been successful, and then we, as part of the task force and maybe the communications group, the hospitality group, look at those regions and identify what they did. Maybe it's research we look on Google and news. How did they do this? What were some of the involvements? Try to talk to the leaders. But we have nowhere to go right now to figure out how to expand our tourism industry. And the thought is, again, let's find out who's done it and see what we can learn. And that's $3,500. Supervisor Bramer.
Mr. Weil, Mr. Diamond has been waiting to ask a question too.
All right, so Mr. Diamond then, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be more comfortable venting this discussion through the tourism department. At this point in time, I'd be unwilling to make a commitment for additional funding, but I think the concept needs to be talked through the tourism department. I'm a member of that committee. I'm very interested in having that dialogue when we have the opportunity.
Okay, Supervisor Bramer.
I would agree with Supervisor Diamond there that this is something that should go through the tourism department. I feel like it's a little bit disingenuous for you to say that we don't have a plan. I mean, Joanne has been working on a plan. We have that report that we paid for ages ago that does have some recommendations in it that she has been looking at. And I was just on a meeting recently where we were talking about, I think it was one of the Mark Bean phone calls that take place weekly, where we were talking about we have a lot of expertise right here in the county. We don't need to pay for reports for someone else to tell us what we might be able to do. We have a lot of experts sitting here in the county and on this Zoom call right here and in the county board meeting. So it just seems a little bit disjointed to, even though I know, $3,500 is not a lot of money. Just seems like we'd be throwing money at something we don't really understand what we're doing. So I would prefer to send it to committee and maybe ask Joanne to put something on for this cycle. The 29th is a committee day. Thank you.
Okay. I will defer Joanne. If my request is acceptable, if we can have a tourism committee meeting this month?
That would be fine.
Do we need Hannah to come in and give us a brief update? Do you think that would be helpful?
If you'd like her to, I can provide the information that she's given me up front with the scope of work. I could share that with the committee ahead of time, but she could certainly, zoom into the call if you'd like to question her.
Okay, thank you. I will defer to the tourism committee. Any other comments, questions?
Chairman Wild.
Supervisor Beatty.
Thank you. I concur with the other supervisors. Obviously, we don't want to start jumping over different committees and so forth. We want to help other committees, but I think actually driving their agenda is really not fruitful for all of us. So I concur with Ms. Bramer and Ms. Hogan, Mr. Leggett and others that it should go through tourism. That's the proper format. And I'm glad you finally concur too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor Beatty. And I think one of the things that I think about constantly is the economy in general. Tourism is a big part of it. We'll work within the bounds and the structure of the Board of Supervisors. But that doesn't mean that I won't be thinking about tourism, and it doesn't mean the Economic Recovery Task Force won't be thinking about tourism. But I'll work with Joanne. We'll try to get something on the agenda for this month, and we'll bring it to the Tourism Committee. Any other thoughts, comments?
Mike, Supervisor Weil?
Yes.
Just for the group, a comment from the cheap seats here. The one thing I think for us all to keep in mind is having outside help on something as critical as tourism. 25% of the county budget is tourism-related sales tax. And trying to get folks that are honestly usually much bigger than us, that have gone through other experiences to contribute is generally a good idea. I mean, in my past experience, we brought people in to evaluate everything we did. And we didn't think we were doing it poorly, but it was a way to test to see, are we missing something, a different angle of attack on problems, et cetera. Different experiences are all learning tools that we would benefit from. And Supervisor Bramer, I appreciate your comments around, the people that are involved in the region. It's been honestly a wonderful experience in a weird way since April, getting to work with a lot of different people that are very, very good at what they do. And as a community, we've come much closer together on these things. But I think if you got, the folks that are involved through the subcommittees that this recovery task force formed, I think to a person, they would all say it's a good idea to have more people involved. And we've benefited from that since. So, not to suggest the team that we have here regionally isn't good. I think we are good. Evidence is, look at how well we do today. And it's just, is there other ideas that we might be missing?
I absolutely agree with you, Frank, that we should take a look at what we are doing. Any organization can improve over time, right? Do a 360 review, see where we have problems or better, we can do things better. I absolutely agree. I just don't know then what is a $3,500 report about what other people are doing, helping us. I don't know. Yeah. And we do have that old report sitting out there.
BBG&G, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I thought we paid a lot of money for that thing.
Yeah, like $25,000, I think. Didn't get a lot of traction, honestly. But yeah, that's again, a bad idea to pull that off the shelf and see what it said, and what can we, under different set of circumstances, is there news in there that we should take advantage of? For example, I think that's a good idea.
Right. And also, I mean, we are government, and sometimes, as much as I hate to say it, like, it is slow, but sometimes the jumping through the hoops and going through the right committees is important for government. It's public money.
No, understood. My comments have nothing to do with how you go about it inside the building there. It had to do with just, I think, having, they call it a sea change, right? Everything's moving on us. And we're working hard on it, but I've been interrupted 8 times on this call with property stuff on properties that aren't even open. I'm getting interrupted with. So, getting some folks that this is what they do and they focus on it, I think would be, beneficial to the whole region. And, this is the month every year since 2015, I stand up and I say 3,000 people lost their job this month.
Right.
Because we closed. That's not okay.
I know. Yeah.
To me, that's a shame. And, whatever we can do, and the sea change gives you a chance to really challenge the way we've gone about things. It doesn't mean we've done anything wrong or bad, by the way. I mean, 25% of a county budget in one sector is pretty significant, I think. So, but could it be 27%?
Yeah, but we also learned, I think, that maybe the money that we bring in is not necessarily all related to things that we are necessarily doing with respect to events and that kind of thing that we really put a lot of focus and attention on, because people came here this summer anyway and we had nothing going on.
Right. So I totally agree. That's a sea change.
Sea change, and let's look at it all over again. I mean, I've been saying, where's Supervisor Sieber? She should be on here too, talking about this. She's been asking for that kind of bigger picture review for years.
Right. We went through.
I'm sorry, Supervisor Wild, taking over.
but that would be part of the analysis, Supervisor Bramer. You know, how do we invest our money? You know, for things that are done in July, you know, this summer we did it with none. So is that a curve? Is that a wave we can ride? So sorry, Supervisor Wild.
No, that's quite all right. Kathy, you had a comment?
Very quick comment. You know, we have the benefit or the opportunity in the tourism industry in that it's mainly seasonal right now to step back and say, okay, how do we do? And it's like a CPA auditing your books. There's a time to do it, and there's a critical nature relative to that timing. I'm not disagreeing or anything with what you've said. I just want you to know that we, don't expect that we're really, experts, because we ask all the time. We're always looking at how other areas might do it better and where our guests go so that we can copy or take them away from those other areas. So we in the tourism community, and I'm sure Frank can give you even more details with all the different varieties of businesses that he has, we are constantly auditing ourselves and looking to see how others do it. It's like every day I walk into the front of one of our hotels and there's a ding on the wall from somebody kicking it in, and at some point I don't see it, and I know I need to be slapped upside the head. And so these are the times, this especially now for us, because we're deciding how much money to put in for next year, because we don't think it will be the same next year. We do not think we'll see that same doubling of reservations. So because it was, as Frank called it, a sea change. So we will participate and help you in any way possible. We always go outside our area to check us at a minimum.
So it should be an interesting discussion in tourism, and I agree, Supervisor Bramer, the discussion is worthwhile having. So we're close to the end. Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you. Does CVB have $3,500 they could throw to this and get it done with right now?
It's a good question. We can ask.
There you go. Good question.
Just a simple phone call away. So I hate to run over time, and right now we've got 10 minutes left. I'm not sure if anyone else is part of the task force. It's kind of hard for me to see everything on Zoom, but one of the things I did want to do was open the floor to the supervisors that are on the committee, aren't on the committee, to give some insight in terms of what's missing. What's your thoughts about where to go? And along the same lines, I want to make sure that you all understand that there's an open invite. If you'd like to join in with the task force meetings, all I have to do is reach out, and I will ensure that you guys get the invite and you can listen into what's happening. It is a public-private cooperation, so we try to keep it to an hour and move forward, but I think it's been very effective so far. But what else do the supervisors think are missing? Where should we be focusing? And Supervisor Hogan, the North Country is definitely part of our discussion moving forward, right? We've been talking about it, and it's part of the plan. How do we make that happen? So any other thoughts?
To be clear, I'm not just about the North Country. I am an advocate because it needs to happen. But, when I'm sitting in this chair, I'm for the whole county. And I think I'm going to say it. What's missing is the public participation as far as the task forces go. Today's been incredibly informative, incredibly, and I appreciate everyone who's taken the time to dial in here and report back to us. I'd like that to happen more frequently, if possible, because this has been really informative, and I think there's been a lot of great discussion, and there will be more great discussion coming out of this. So, to me, that's what's been missing.
I hear you. It's a matter of taking away the time from the people who are actually doing the work. So I will refer to the task force and ask them to give me an idea of what they think is reasonable in terms of them sharing more time. Any other questions, comments? I see Liza.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to respond to Supervisor Hogan's valid concern about making sure that the public is participating. I did want everyone to know that when we're working on the hospitality training program, it was Jim Siplon's idea that we ask people who work in the hospitality field what skills they feel like would be necessary to include in the training program. And they loved being asked, right? Just being asked for their opinion, their input, and what they can, and knowing what everybody's working on, but that their input mattered. And I think we can continue to layer that in different places. And then the other thing that was a learning curve for me throughout this process the last several months is that climate and culture, right? So climate is where we're at in a moment, and culture is, who we are long term. And I think in balancing out our priorities for short term and long term, we have to look at what are the immediate needs of our climate, and then culturally long term, how are we shifting to a four-season tourist economy?
Any other comments, thoughts? Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Liza, the culture point was something I was just thinking of. Culture of an entrepreneurial spirit, of bringing up people that aren't just looking for a job where they go in and get paid at the end of the week, but actually can create a business. We live in a rural area, and a lot of people need to pull up their bootstraps and make a business of their own one way or another. That is what funds our economy through here. You think of all the small shops and the larger operations. It all starts with people that have an entrepreneurial spirit. Living in a rural area, you're not always exposed to that. So bringing up our young folks and being able to expose them and giving them the tools to be able to create their own businesses and being able to think as a business person versus then just a hired employee is very important. So a culture. Also in culture, what is amazing is that we have a 400-pound gorilla in Johnsburg. We have Gore Mountain, and we do not really have a ski culture as robust as it could be within our communities. Town of Chester has Dynamite Hill, free ski area. We have a lot of Queensbury residents come up and use it mostly for sledding, but there's to be able to create an opportunity for people to develop a culture of outdoor utilization is also important as well. So, Liza, thank you for bringing up that long-term strategy of culture and how to address it.
Thank you, Supervisor Leggett. Any other questions or comments? Mr. Lehman, I'm sorry, Supervisor Conover.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be remiss if I didn't put on the table that I don't care what kind of economy you're looking to build, it has to be built on a solid foundation of infrastructure. And we have $150 million worth of projects sitting in a wish list form at the county that's still yet to be put into a plan form. And until such time as it's put into a plan form, I don't know how we continue to expect that we're going to be expanding substantially on our user base. So if I were going to spend some money right now, it would be to our planning office to either internally or with consultants to bring that inventory into a plan form. Because when you do that, then you have a plan going forward for Johnsburg and the tens of millions of dollars that they need in their infrastructure, or Glens Falls that needs, who knows, 40, 50, 60 millions of dollars of infrastructure to help support their economic development. I mean, here in Bolton, we have some of the most primary tourism destinations on the lake, but we're going to be needing millions of dollars to upgrade those facilities so that we can compete going forward. So I think that the Economic Development Committee really needs to focus on the infrastructure requirements of our economy broadly, but also as it relates to tourism, of course. Thank you.
Supervisor Conover, thank you. That's a good point. Wayne Lamont, are you still on?
Mr. Wild,
Yes.
Mr. Molino would like to speak too.
I will do that. Let's let Wayne just comment about what Mr. Conover, Supervisor Conover just brought up in terms of our infrastructure plan. Wayne, are we moving forward with that?
Yes, I agree with Supervisor Conover. This plan is actually overdue. We, in all honesty, got sidetracked with COVID and with the census. Although I've been talking with Sarah, we're getting back on track with this. I had an email with Ryan Moore about the next phase of what we need to do. And we're hopefully going to have a sit down with him and Tammy and Sarah and myself in the next few weeks. We've had to look at what we collected previously, looked at the issues with the database structure, and Sarah's kind of reworking that. I think we're hopefully that we can have all of this put together, at least the database side of it, by the end of the year.
Thanks, Wayne. Please engage me with that discussions also. Supervisor Merlino, Gene?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick note about Lake Luzerne, which I'm pretty happy about. During this culvert, we've had 5 new businesses open in Lake Luzerne. One was Meadows that opened in February, got destroyed for the rest of a couple of months, but they're coming to finish up their project. But we opened a new ladies barber shop in our town. We have 2 new stores open, one for women's clothes and another one for refurnished antique furniture, and another one for selling goods on consignment. And I have another one that's working on a building to be a takeout restaurant for barbecue. Now, except for the barbecue, the others were all women. All women taking a chance on opening a little store in the town of Lake Luzerne during this, probably the worst time for they should be opening, in my opinion, but I'm supporting them highly and I really want to wish them well. So, but everything that I've heard all morning this morning is all positive, and it's nice to see everybody working together. And a couple of things that Joanne and I have been discussing, she didn't bring them up, but we will bring up tourism because there's a lot of ways everybody's looking for the ROI. Well, you can get on information on your cell phone, how many people use a cell phone in Warren County. There's so many different little things back and forth. I like the STAR program, but I know you all won't agree with me on this, but it's tough to compete with Florida right now, because now this is going to be their time for the season of warm weather. That's where people are going. We can't take those people and make them come to Warren County, unless they like snow and snowmobiling and cross-country skiing. So it's tough to compare different places to the STAR program, but it's nice to find out. So I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Merlino. Any other questions, comments? Mr. Lehman, any public comment?
Hello, Chairman Wild. We do not have any public comment on YouTube at this time.
Thank you. Privilege of the floor. Any other comments? With that, I apologize. My clock says 11:01. I was supposed to be done at 11. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Supervisor Bramer, Supervisor Hogan, and a second. All in favor? I'm thinking that's positive. Thank you so much for the supervisors to show up, as well as those individuals that joined from the task force. I appreciate your time and all the great work you're doing. Everyone have a great day. Thank you very much.